Welcome to Cafe Snacks, most wanted questions of current happenings for UPSC, SSC, and other state administrative examinations. It is Onlearn, and this is Shyam here. Let us move on to the first question. The opportunity for MPs to raise national issues without an advance notice became available at 12 pm and could last for an hour until the House is adjourned for lunch. And it is called A. Question hour, B. Adjournment motion, C. No confidence motion, D. 0 hour. Now, the answer is D. 0 hour. Let us discuss about 0 hour. What is a 0 hour? Now, question hour is strictly regulated because it comes under the rules of procedure of the House. And what about 0 hour? 0 hour is an Indian parliamentary innovation. And the concept of 0 hour started organically in the first decade of Indian parliament. That is to be remembered. And the parliament usually used to break for lunch at 1 pm. Therefore, the opportunities for MPs to raise national issues without an advance notice became available at 12 pm, and it could last for an hour until the House is adjourned for lunch. And that is the reason why it is popularly referred to as 0 hour. And that is its popularity. And the issues being raised during this time is known as 0 hour submissions. That is to be remembered. And 0 hour is just like a gauge, and it can measure the support of the citizens, media, MPs, and presiding officers. That's about 0 hour. Now read it carefully. Let us move on to the next question. Which are the procedural devices for raising matters of public interest? A. No confidence motion. B. Calling attention. C. Adjournment motion. D. No day yet named motion. Now, both of these questions came into our perspective because recently the government has decided to play down with the question hour in the monsoon session of upcoming parliament. Particular session is going on, but it has not yet been completed. So you need to understand about no confidence motion and other various procedures in order to find this answer. And both these questions, the previous question and this question, comes under GS2 paper, Polity and Constitution. The options are 1, A, B, C and D, 2, A, B and C, 3, A, B and D, 4, A only. Let us discuss. First, you need to understand when the sessions are held. Parliamentary sessions are usually held thrice a year. Once in February for the budget session, once around July or August for the monsoon session, once in November for the winter session. So this year the government is yet to announce the dates for the winter session. Now, the practice of allowing the government to convene parliament differs from those followed in other countries. In India, it is the government who summons the legislature. And this can be a problem because in a parliamentary democracy, the executive is accountable to the parliament. So executive calling the parliament to convene a particular meeting is against the principles of democracy, and it can be argued so. But still, in our nation, it is a procedure. Now, what is the role of parliament in a democracy? And this particular paragraph is very important. The constitution provides for the legislature to make laws. That is, the parliament is the one that makes laws. The government to implement laws. The executive or the government is the one that implements law. And the courts to interpret and enforce these laws. While the judiciary is independent from other two branches, the government is formed with the support of a majority of members in the legislature. That means a government should enjoy the majority in the lower house, that is the Lok Sabha. Therefore, the government is collectively responsible to the parliament for its actions. This implies that the parliament can hold the government accountable for its decisions and scrutinize its functioning. That's it. And there are various procedures used for scrutinizing the government. Now, the procedural devices for raising matters of public interest. And all this information is being taken from the Lok Sabha site. So you can trust it. Now you need to understand about the procedural devices. The first procedural devices is calling attention. Now what is calling attention? Under this procedural device, a member may, with prior permission of the speaker, call the attention of a minister to any matter of urgent public importance, and the minister may make a brief statement thereon. And you need to understand that only those matters which are primarily the concern of union government can be raised through a calling attention notice. The calling attention procedure is an Indian innovation that you need to be remembered. That is all about calling attention. Now, what is a motion? It is another procedure for raising matters of public interest. A motion in a parliamentary parlance means any formal proposal made to the House by a member for the purpose of eliciting a decision of the House. So if he feels that he need to get the opinion of the House, he will be invoking certain matters of public importance. Now, it is phrased in such a way that if adopted, it will purport to express the judgment or the will of the House. That means if it is adopted, it will lead to the judgment of the House. Now, any matter of importance can be the subject matter of a motion. So, since you have understood about motion, let us discuss more about it. Now, there are different types of motions. The motions may be classified into three broad categories, namely substantive motions, substitute motions, and subsidiary motions. Now, what is a substantive motion? A substantive motion is a self-contained, independent proposal made in reference to a subject which the mover wishes to bring forward. That means if a mover wishes that a particular matter is of great importance, he himself come into the forefront to express that matter, and that is through substantive motion. All resolutions, motions for election of the speaker and deputy speaker, and motion of thanks on address by the president, etc. are examples of substantive motion. Okay, now substantive motion is the most original and important motion. Now, what about substitute motion? A substitute motion, as its name suggests, is moved in substitution of the original motion for taking into consideration a policy or situation or statement or any other matter. So, substitute motion means it follows an original motion in order to take care of a particular subject. Now, look into subsidiary motion. Subsidiary motions depend upon or relate to other motions or follow upon some proceedings in the House. That means it is related to other motions or it is follow up to other proceedings in the House. Now, since you have understood three different types of motions, you need to understand three other motions deeply. That is the adjournment motion, motion of no confidence, and no day yet named motion. Only if you understand these three, you can answer the second question. Now, all these paragraphs are important, so take a screenshot and read it after the class is over. The adjournment motion is a procedure for adjournment or extending the business of the House for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent public importance which can be moved with the consent of the speaker. So, in case of adjournment motion, the speaker is the deciding factor. Now, the adjournment motion, if admitted, leads to setting aside of the normal business of the House for discussing the matter mentioned in the motion. That means it will set the House into rolling and the discussions will be followed. To be in order, an adjournment motion must raise a matter of sufficient public importance to warrant interruptions of normal business of the House, and the question of public importance is decided on merit in each individual case, and that is need to be remembered. Now, the adjournment motion can be introduced only in Lok Sabha because it is a form of censure to the government. It holds the government accountable. Now, what is a motion of no confidence? Now, the government must always enjoy majority support in the popular house or the lower house to remain in power. If need be, it has to demonstrate its strength on the floor of the House by moving a motion of confidence and winning the confidence of the House. In a view of the express constitutional provision regarding collective responsibility of the Council of Ministers to the Lok Sabha, a motion expressing want of confidence in the individual minister is out of order. That means you cannot pass a no confidence motion against an individual minister, but it should be passed entirely against the Council of Ministers as a body, and that is only admissible. Now, Rule 198 of the Rules of Procedure and Conduct of Business in Lok Sabha lays down the procedure for moving a motion of no confidence in the Council of Ministers, and that is to be remembered under which rule it comes. Now, what is no day yet named motion? If the speaker admits notice of a motion and no date is fixed for its discussion, it is called a no day yet named motion. That is to be remembered about it. Now let us go back and find the answer. Now, which of the following is the answer? You know that no confidence motion raises matters of public interest, calling attention do so, adjournment motion do so, and no day yet named motion to do so. So, all the four are right. That is 1, A, B, C, and D. Now, before moving on to the next question, there is an article by M.R. Madhavan in Hindu that is Parliament Stifled, Business and a Word of Advice. And this article speaks about the threat to our constitution regarding cutting down the question hour. The upcoming monsoon session of Parliament from September 14 is emblematic of the issues faced by legislatures during the novel coronavirus pandemic. How do these bodies fulfill their central role in a democracy while maintaining health safety of legislators and the staff working in the legislatures? The roles of the key organs of state. What are the roles of the key organs of state is being discussed in this article. What are the roles? Let us look into that. The government has the mandate to take decisions and perform various public tasks. It is accountable to the legislature, which can question it and, as an extreme step, even replace it. That is the duty of the government. Now, what about legislature? Legislature is accountable to citizens through regular elections and can be voted out if it is not perceived to be making laws and policies beneficial to the public. Now, finally, the constitutional courts are expected to ensure that all actions are made within the boundaries of the constitution and laws made by the legislature. Now, what are the areas in which the parliament has failed to uphold the democratic value recently? One is contact tracing. That means the Arogya Setu app is being an executive order doesn't went through the scrutiny of the parliament. Whereas in Britain, when they passed a particular legislature regarding an app which was used for collection of data from the COVID-19 patients, the parliament decided that only after passing a primary legislature such an act can go on. Act means the very act of passing or making a particular application. Now, areas where the parliament failed to uphold the democracy, one is contact tracing, B is halting of procedures. Now, halting of procedure happened because since the COVID-19 pandemic, the parliament was not in session. This happened because there is no proper infrastructural institutions or technological infrastructure in order to go on with the process of the parliament. Especially in developed nations, the technology is so developed that online conferences and other meetings can be easily held. Now, C is court interventions. You need to understand that regarding public policy, it is a duty of the parliament to look into such matters. Whereas recently you can see that court is being interfering in such matters. That is how our democratic values is being hauled into question. Now, what about D? Restriction of public interest procedures. Public interest procedures include question hour. So, the question hour has been recently played down by the ruling government. So, that is another failed attempt to uphold the democratic value. So, that's it. Read this complete article and let us move on to the next question. A block disables access for a user in India through an internet service provider. Which of the following section of IT Act 2000 is associated with blocking? Which of them is associated with blocking? A. Section 69A, B. Section 66A, C. Section 55, D. Section 64. Let us discuss. First, you need to understand that while holding the Section 66A of the Information Technology Act, that is Amendment Act 2018, as constitutional and laying down guidelines for online takedowns under the intermediary rules, the court in Shreya Singhal vs. Union of India has upheld the Section 69A and the blocking rules framed under it. So you need to understand that blocking comes under section 69A. But taking down a content was under section 66A, and that is being struck down. The blocking rules are distinct from online takedowns. Technically, a takedown results in the removal of content by an online platform such as Facebook, and a block disables access for a user in India through an internet service provider such as Airtel. In practice, the state has routinely blocked content on internet in complete secrecy. Now, what is Section 69A of the IT Act 2000? Now, first you need to understand that the first clause is that where the central government or any of its officers specially authorized by it in this behalf is satisfied that it is necessary to expedient so to do in interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, if they feel that the integrity and sovereignty of the nation is being compromised, or the defense of India is compromised, or security of state, friendly relations with foreign states, or public order, or for preventing incitement to the commission of any cognizable offense relating to above, it may subject to the provision of subsection 2. That is, this section will be considered, and for reasons to be recorded in writing by order, direct any agency of government or intermediary to block for access by the public. The public access will be denied, or cause to be blocked for access by the public any information generated, transmitted, received, stored, or hosted in any computer resource. That is blocking, and it speaks about blocking. Now, according to the second clause, the procedure and safeguards subject to which such blocking for access by public may be carried out shall be such as may be prescribed, and it will be done in the prescribed manner. All the blocking regarding the procedure aspects. Now, third, the intermediary who fails to comply with the direction issued under subsection 1 shall be punished with an imprisonment for a term which may extend to 7 years and also be liable to fine. That means if the government agency is not doing that and being suggested to an intermediary to block for access by the public, and that intermediary, if he is not complying with the direction, he will be punished. So let us move on and find the answer. So the answer is A, Section 69A. And you need to remember that Section 66A had been struck down. And the case is Shreya Singhal versus Union of India. That is a very important case. Let us move on to the next question. Washington Treaty 1949 led to the establishment of A, CETO. CETO is Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. B, United Nations. C, UNEP, United Nations Environment Program. D, NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now the answer is D, NATO. Let us discuss more about NATO and Washington Treaty of 1949. North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it is a military alliance, and that is established by North Atlantic Treaty, or famously known as Washington Treaty of April 4, 1949, which sought to create a counterweight to Soviet armies stationed in Central and Eastern Europe after World War II. Now, the original members were Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Now, joining the original signatories in 1952 were Greece and Turkey. Then West Germany came into play. Then Spain, Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Albania, Croatia, and Montenegro in 2017. And you need to remember that in 2020, Macedonia too joined NATO, and that is a recent member. Now, France withdrew from the Integrated Military Command of NATO in 1966, but it came back in 2009, and that need to be remembered. And the heart of the NATO is expressed in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. And what is Article 5? Article 5 says that if there is an attack on any of the ally, it is considered an attack against them all. Attack against them all. That is to be remembered. That is very important. Do read this article, please. NATO invoked Article 5 for the first time in 2001 during the September 11 attacks. And you need to remember that Article 6 defines the geographic scope of the treaty as covering an armed attack on the territory of any of the parties in Europe or North America. So that's it. Let us move on to the next question. Which of the following countries surrounds the Aegean Sea? A. Turkey, B. Greece, C. Republic of Macedonia, D. Bulgaria. And there are options 1, A, B, and C, 2, A and C, 3, A and B, 4, D only. Now let us discuss. Here we have a map of Turkey and Greece. There is Bulgaria, there is North Macedonia. You can see that Greece and Turkey surrounds the Aegean Sea. The Aegean Sea is here. This is the Sea of Marmara. This is the Sea of Marmara and that is above Turkey, and this is the Aegean Sea. So Greece and Turkey is the answer. Greece and Turkey is the answer. Now there is a conflict that is being going between Greece and Turkey. Why is there a conflict? Because there are many issues. Recently, the Hagia Sophia Museum was trying to be converted into a mosque by the Turkish government, and that is being opposed by the Greece government. And also you need to understand about Cyprus. Now Cyprus is an island that is below Turkey. Cyprus is below Turkey. And Cyprus is being divided into two parts by these dotted lines. You can see that. That is the UN green zone. It is known as the UN green zone. And the above portion is being recognized only by Turkey. The Turkey says that this is a Turkish part. And the below portion is being recognized by Greece. But entirely, Cyprus is always considered just as the Republic of Cyprus. And usually, when people say Republic of Cyprus, they mean the lower part that is being recognized by Greece. But in entirety, it is a nation. It is not divided into two in the global scenario, especially the UN has not said so. So you need to understand that there is an ongoing tension between Turkey and Greece because near Cyprus, in its coastal regions and in the territorial waters, huge deposits of oil has been recognized. So Greece and Turkey is claiming that oil reserves, and that is the reason why there is an ongoing tension or tug of war between Turkey and Greece. That is to be remembered. And in the UPSC perspective or in SSC perspective, you need to be always aware that if a nation or a city or any sea or territorial waters come into picture in the recent activities or the news articles, you need to focus on the nation, its territories, the city, its arrangement, etc. So the answer is Turkey, B, Greece. That is A and B. That is the option 3. So let us move on and discuss further. The RBI has decided to review and revise the priority sector lending guidelines. The revised PSL guidelines, that is priority sector lending guidelines, will enable better credit penetration to credit deficient areas. The revised guidelines focus on A. Small and marginal farmers, B. Startup ecosystem, C. Renewable energy, D. Health infrastructure. Here the options are not being given. And you should understand that RBI has a set of priority sectors and that are included in the following category as 1. Agriculture, 2. Micro, small and medium enterprises, 3. Export credit, 4. Education, 5th. Housing, 6. Social infrastructure, 7. Renewable energy, and 8. It is mentioned as others. That means other sectors are also included, other smaller sectors, but these are the important sectors. That is agriculture, micro, small and medium enterprises, 3. Export credit, 4. Education, 5th. Housing, 6th. Social infrastructure. So you should understand that all these 4 comes under priority sector lending. So all the 4 are part of the answer. Sorry for not giving the option, but it is easily understood. And you need to understand the revised priority sector lending guidelines. And this part comes in GS3 paper, that is in the economy, and also the policy of RBI. The Reserve Bank of India has comprehensively reviewed the priority sector lending guidelines to align it with emerging national priorities and bring sharper focus on inclusive development after having wide-ranging discussions with all stakeholders. So it has decided to make the priority sector lending guidelines more efficient. The revised PSL guidelines will enable better credit penetration to credit deficient areas, increasing the lending to small and marginal farmers. So small and marginal farmers are being considered in the revised PSL guidelines, and also the weaker sections, and boost credit to renewable energy and health infrastructure. So renewable energy and health infrastructure too is being considered to be boosted. The bank finance to startups has been increased up to rupees 50 crore. And loans for farmers for installation of solar power plants, for solarization of grid-connected agriculture pumps, and loans for setting up compressed biogas plants have been included as fresh categories. So solar power plants and CBG have been included as fresh categories. That is to be remembered. And the guidelines are basically to address regional disparities in flow of PSC, that is priority sector credit. Now, higher weightage have been assigned to incremental priority sector credit in identified district where priority sector credit flow is comparatively low. That means if a place or a district is being identified as priority sector credit flow lower, then there need to be an injection in the credit that is flowing to the particular district. Now 2, the targets prescribed for small and marginal farmers and weaker sections are being increased in a phased manner. 3, the credit limit has been specified for farmers producers organizations, farmers producers companies and undertaking farming, and those people undertaking farming with assured marketing of their produce at a predetermined price. So farmers producers organization and farmers producers companies are getting a higher credit limit. Now, loan limits for renewable energy have been increased. As you have seen, a loan of up to 50 crore is available for installation of solar power plants. Now, 5, for improvement of health infrastructure, credit limit for health infrastructure, including those under Ayushman Bharat scheme of the government, has been doubled. So, that is all about it. And I hope that you are clear with that. Let us move on to the next. Regional anti-terrorist structure is associated with SCO, that is Shanghai Cooperation Organization, B, UN General Assembly, C, WTO, World Trade Organization, D, United Nations Environment Program. So let us discuss about regional anti-terrorist structure. Now you can see that here it is given that the organization has 2 permanent bodies and it speaks about SCO and SCO's regional anti-terrorist structure. So the answer is A, SCO. So you need to discuss and study more about SCO. Let us do that. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a permanent intergovernmental international organization, the creation of which was announced in 2001 in Shanghai by the Republic of Kazakhstan, People's Republic of China, the Kyrgyz Republic, the Russian Federation, the Republic of Tajikistan, the Republic of Uzbekistan. Now, it was preceded by Shanghai 5 mechanism. So the first organization was Shanghai 5 mechanism and it was modified into Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, Shanghai Cooperation Organization Charter was signed during the St. Petersburg SCO Heads of the State meet in June 2002 and it entered into force in 19 September 2003. The historical meeting, that is the second point, the historical meeting of the heads of State Council of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization was held on 8 to 9 June 2017 in Astana, and it is where the organization granted the Republic of India and Islamic Republic of Pakistan the full membership. So you need to remember that SCO is a rare organization in which both Pakistan and Republic of India is a part of. Now, the Heads of State Council is a supreme decision-making body in SCO. It meets once a year and adopts decisions and guidelines on all important matters of the organization. So, Heads of the State Council is a supreme decision-making body. Now, there are other 2 permanent bodies. That is the SCO Secretariat based in Beijing and Executive Committee of the Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure, that is RATS, based in Tashkent. And SCO Secretary General is the highest officer in the Secretariat and the Director of the Executive Committee of the RATS is another important officer. And both of these are appointed by the Council of Heads of the State for a term of 3 years. Now, SCO comprises 8 member states, namely Republic of India, Republic of Kazakhstan, People's Republic of China, the Kyrgyz Republic, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, the Russian Federation, Republic of Tajikistan and Republic of Uzbekistan. So you know that the answer is SCO. So let us move on to the next question. And why this particular news? This is because currently SCO meeting is going on. And that comes under GS paper 2 in bilateral regional cooperation, ties and also international relations. Which of the following provisions of the Railway Act 1989 is incorrect? A. According to the section 144 of the Railway Act, if a person is found begging in a train or at a railway station, they could be imprisoned for a term that may extend to 1 year or be liable to a fine of up to rupees 2000. So in order to answer this, you need to be very much knowledgeable about the Railway Act of 1989, especially the important provision of this act that has recently appeared in the news article. So Statement B, Section 167 of the Act prohibits smoking in a train compartment if another passenger objects to it. So the options are 1A only, B2 only, 3A and B for none. So you need to understand about the Railway Act 1989 and which of the provisions are being in news. Now, the Ministry of Railway has moved a proposal, and that is the reason why this question is being chosen, has moved a proposal to decriminalize begging at railway station and trains, as the provision of the Railway Act 1989 is seldom invoked and can often be used to harass people, and that's the reason why they are trying to amend it. According to the sources in the ministry, the move is part of an exercise to review and rationalize and penalties regarding the penalties under the provisions of the Railway Act 1989. Now, according to Section 144 of the Railway Act, if a person is found begging in a train or at a railway station, they could be imprisoned for a term that may extend to 1 year and or may be liable to pay a fine up to rupees 2000. So the first statement is right. So it is not incorrect. Here the question is asked which of the following is incorrect. So the first statement is right. So A is not incorrect. Now, the Ministry of Railway has proposed to change. What is the proposition? To change the section to simply state that nobody will be allowed to beg in any railway carriage or on any part of the railway's property without penalty. So this is the amendment that they are going to bring. Now, in addition to the change, Railways is also considering amending Section 167 of the Act, which prohibits smoking in a train compartment if another passenger objects to it. The proposed amendment intends to do away with the procedure of a case and instead simply levy a spot fine of up to rupees 100. That is the amendment. A spot fine of rupees 100 is a new amendment which they are going to bring in. So B2 is right. So the answer is 4. None of the above are incorrect. That is the answer. So let us move on to the next part. Now here there are no questions further. The question sections are over and the discussions are over. But I need to bring certain important news to your attention. That is, recently you might have heard that His Holiness Keshavananda Bharati has died. So what is the Keshavananda Bharati judgment or the case? That is need to be understood. So by a 7-6 majority judgment, that is a 13-judge bench, delivered in His Holiness Keshavananda Bharati, Sri Padagalavuru and others vice State of Kerala and another. A 13-judge bench of the Supreme Court ruled on April 24, 1973 that the basic structure of the Constitution is inviolable and cannot be amended by the Parliament. So you need to understand what is the judgment all about. The court held that under Article 368 of the Constitution, which provides Parliament amending powers. So Article 368 is with respect to the amending powers of the Parliament. Something must remain of the original Constitution that the new amendment would not change. That means if any new amendment came into picture, it should not change what is the original format of the Constitution. And that originality is known as the basic structure of the Constitution. But while the judgment established the doctrine of basic structure and ruled that Parliament had no power to alter it, the court did not define basic structure itself. It did not speak anything detail about the basic structure. It only listed a few principles. Among them, federalism, secularism, and democracy are major. And since then, the court has been adding new features to this concept. Now, the basic structure is today widely interpreted to include the supremacy of the Constitution, the rule of law, independence of the judiciary, doctrine of separation of powers, federalism, secularism, sovereign democratic republic, the parliamentary system of the government, the principles of free and fair election, welfare state, etc. Now, this article is being taken from Indian Express, so it is relevant. Do take a screenshot and read. Let us look into another news. So JNCASR researchers developed diagnostic therapy for lung cancer. Now you need to understand what is JNCASR and also about lung cancer and what is a new form of treatment that they have founded out. Now, JNCASR, that is Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research, is an autonomous institution under Department of Science and Technology. Department of Science and Technology is under Ministry of Science and Technology and have developed a theranostics. What have they done? They have developed a theranostics, that is a diagnostic therapy. Diagnostic therapy is known as theranostics drug, and it is a candidate for lung cancer. And you need to understand that it is being published in the journal Theranostics. Theranostics is the journal in which it is being published. Now you need to understand an important fact about lung cancer. Lung cancer is the most common cause of cancer-related death worldwide, and it is tough to detect at early stages, and that is why it is difficult to treat. And that is an important fact. And you need to understand that what is the kind of treatment or the drug, that is the theranostics drug that they have found. How does it work? Now you need to understand that the selective recognition and imaging of oncogene specific non-canonical DNA secondary structures holds great promise in the development of diagnostic therapy. That means they are able to identify the oncogene, that is the cancer specific non-canonical DNA secondary structure. That is how it is being done. They identify this particular structure by using far red fluorescent response. That is, by using fluorescence type of light, they are able to recognize this particular kind of G quadruplex GQ structures. That means DNA secondary structures. So you need to understand what is non-canonical DNA secondary structures. Now first and foremost, these parts including sugar and phosphate is known as nucleoside of DNA. These are the nucleosides. Now, this is a nucleoside and this is another nucleoside. And both these are connected by a hydrogen bond through base pairs. This particular portion of the DNA is known as base pair. That is, here the base pair is adenine and here it is thymine. So, adenine joins with thymine and here it is guanine. Guanine joins with cytosine. So, these are the four base pairs, and these four base pairs with nucleosides, and these are the nucleosides with nucleosides in a continuing arrangements, that is continuing parallel arrangements like a helix structure forms the DNA, and that is the structure of the DNA. And you need to understand that this hydrogen bonded portion including the base pair is known as the secondary structure, and these are the secondary structures. Okay, I think you understood that. And what is non-canonical? Usually adenine joins with thymine and guanine with cytosine. These are the four base pairs. But sometimes there can be other base pairs like uracil. Now if adenine joins with uracil instead of thymine, it becomes non-canonical. If adenine joins with thymine and guanine joins with cytosine, as usually is the case, it is canonical DNA structures. So when the secondary structures, these are the secondary structures, in secondary structure, instead of the four usual base pairs, there is another base pair like the uracil or etc. that joins with adenine, or guanine joins with some other kinds of base pair. Then that is known as non-canonical. And this non-canonical base pairs or non-canonical secondary structures are important identifiers for cancers. And now using the red fluorescence, and that is the spectrum of the light. Red fluorescence, far red fluorescence is the spectrum of light using which they are able to identify these non-canonical DNA secondary structures, and they are being able to identify G quadruplex. And what is G quadruplex? That means if the guanine is being repeated continuously, then it means that there is an abundance of guanine, and that is known as G quadruplex, simply speaking. So that is how they have identified the cancer genes, and that is very important. Now there are another two newses. Now this news is not much important, but you need to understand that low reflection lenses, high reflection mirrors in devices such as better binoculars and telescopes, color changing paints and inks may now be powered by a newly discovered property of the interaction between light and molecules. So it is being founded by scientists from Center for Nano and Soft Matter Sciences. Now, what is Center for Nano and Soft Matter Sciences all about? It is an autonomous institute of the Department of Science and Technology, that is under the Ministry of Science and Technology, and they have discovered the high levels of light in blue wavelength or actinic light. It is also known as actinic light, lead to switching between two photoisomers. It leads to the switching between two photoisomers, now which are liquid crystal phases possessing photonic structure. And these part are not so important. You need to understand about CENS, and you need to understand that there is a newly discovered interaction between light and molecules that will be used in low reflection lenses, high reflection mirrors in devices such as better binoculars and telescopes, and color changing paints and inks. That is to be remembered. And these Bangalore based scientists have found UV and blue light combination or reversibly switches the system between 3D and 1D photonic structure. So the photonic structure will be changing from 3D structure to one-dimensional structure with the help of UV and blue light combination, and that is to be remembered too. Now, another important news is the third Rashtriya Poshan Ma. Ma means month. So, this is the third Rashtriya Poshan month, which is being celebrated in the month of September 2020. And you need to understand that the Rashtriya Poshan Ma is celebrated during the month of September 2020 this year. And every year, Poshan Ma is celebrated under Poshan Abhiyan. What is Poshan Abhiyan? It is PM's overarching scheme for holistic nourishment, and which was launched in 2018. Now, the Ministry of Women and Child Development, that is a nodal ministry for the Poshan Abhiyan, and that ministry is celebrating the Poshan Ma, and that is to be remembered, and it in convergence with partner ministries and department at national, state and grassroots level. And what is the objective of the National Poshan Ma or the Rashtriya Poshan Ma? The Rashtriya Poshan Ma objective is to encourage Jan Bhagidari. What is Jan Bhagidari? Jan Bhagidari is the term that is used by the government for people's participation, and it is also in order to create Jan Andolan, that is also community participation for addressing malnutrition among young children, women, and to ensure their health. And that is the purpose of Jan Bhagidari and Poshan Ma. That is all for today. Do take the screenshot of every information that is being provided and read through that. I hope that all these are helpful to you. Thank you.